Well, today on the Practice of the Practice podcast, we have Carrie and Andy Sears. Carrie and Andy are a husband and wife team who own and operate Blue Boat Counseling, a group practice in Worthington, Ohio. Andy's the counselor and Carrie's the marketer. They're working hard to grow their team of badass and winning the Google name and branding game of content and SEO. Andy's worked with Joe in one-on-one consulting and in Next Level Mastermind, and they also both came to Slow Down School. Welcome, Carrie and Andy. Great to see you guys again.
Thanks.
Hey, Joe.
Thanks
for having us.
Oh, it's always so fun to hang out with people on the podcast that I've met in person. It's just like, you meet these people online and then you never realize just how tall Andy Sears is. And then you meet him. The whole time he's been sitting in this chair and I never knew how tall he was. And then boom, he's like 7 feet tall.
Our children have his height. I'm going to be the shortest in the family real soon.
Oh, man. Well, yeah. Let's go back, Andy. I still remember the moment we were doing our pre-consulting call. And as we started to talk about you potentially doing consulting with me, take us through maybe the year or two before that. What was life like as a counselor? How is the practice going? And then when you reached out to me, we can kind of talk about what's helped you grow your practice. And then I'd love to really get into the kind of husband and wife dynamic. But Andy, why don't you kick it off for us and sketch out what life was like kind of the couple years before we started working together?
Yeah, sure. So I was in a solo practice and I was doing everything. So, and I was taking about every insurance on the planet that you can take in this area, thinking that was kind of the way that it's supposed to go. That's kind of what they told us in school, get your license and then get on as many insurances as you can. And it was fine. I mean, it was a lot of work. And you can only go so far. I think I took it as far as I could, as far as income, the amount of clients I was seeing, and stress level. And then, Carrie, I guess at the same time you had been listening to Joe. You had kind of discovered Joe.
Yep.
And she mentioned, she brought you up a couple times. I'm like, whatever, I'm going to work. Like, I know what I'm doing.
Carrie, I want to pause there. So
yeah.
You weren't in the private practice world at the time. What was your kind of occupation at that time?
So I've been, I've had a couple of hats. I was a food scientist first for several years. And then I realized I loved understanding consumers and kind of more the marketing aspect. I've worked in the food industry, and so I went back and got a marketing degree, and I'd been hanging out working in what we called consumer insight for a decade. But I could see that Andy was maxed out, but I could also see the potential that there was in trying to grow what he was doing. And I also was feeling pretty maxed out and not like I was adding a lot of value in what I was doing, and that there was kind of a white space here that we could explore. So for probably a solid year, I was listening to podcasts and doing my homework, doing a lot of research. But it was just on the side. Andy was doing his thing, I was doing my thing. And, but you were definitely the first podcast I found. I was listening to it. I was like addicted, and I was coming home telling him, I'm like, oh, you got to listen to this podcast. I'm telling you. And he has a group practice in Michigan. Okay. So not far from us, and it's private pay. And he's like,
It's so funny because usually it's the therapist that's like, Joe says we should do this. And then the spouse is like, I am so sick of hearing about Joe.
No, yeah, totally the reverse.
Yeah, it was totally different for us. Yeah.
Well, before we go too far down that path, I have some food scientist questions. So I've had this idea.
I'm out of the game a while, Joe.
That's okay. I want you to tell me if this is even something that could happen or if it's a magical idea. So here's my idea, that there's like the 4-hour energy drink, like that little kind of shot thing.
Yeah.
There's something like that someone could put into a really cheap beer. So it's like a PBR, but it makes it taste like an IPA, or it makes it taste like a stout. Is that even possible?
I think it's a great idea, but those things are going to work against you, right? Because you have this downer that is beer and this upper that is energy. I don't know.
Well, not even the energy drink, just that it makes it taste new. Like that you could get a cheap beer and make it taste like an IPA.
Oh. Well, that's a lot of flavor work, which was my first world. I used to work in the flavor industry, but I used to apply the flavors into the beer that the flavor chemist made. So we would need a good flavor chemist on your project.
Maybe that's
And
a fun
then-
side project for us to work
Yes,
on.
yes, for sure.
Okay,
I know some of those people. So
okay, I was
about
just
that.
thinking about that recently, and now it has come up in this conversation. So might as well ask you for some free consulting.
For sure, yeah.
All right, so you're listening to the podcast, and when does Andy finally cave? And he's like, okay, I'll listen to this.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Well, when she said,
I'll tell you the time. I know it.
okay,
I know the answer.
okay, go ahead.
Well, so and I'm going to bring up another podcast here. Hope that's all right, Joe.
That's
but
okay.
through listening to you, I also discovered Perry Rosenblum. So I always occasionally listen to his podcast. Well, he did a private pay series that you were on, right? I think you were on it.
Yeah, Perry's awesome.
Yeah. So I listened to that whole series, and there was one podcast in particular in there. I believe the man's name was Eddie Reese, I think I want to say. But anyway, there was a podcast in particular where he was very hardcore about this private pay. And when you don't own your own business if you take insurance, because you're a contractor to insurance companies and you work for insurance companies. And I told Andy he needed to listen to that whole series, but that podcast in particular was like a light bulb. And knowing Andy the way I do, I knew that one would hit home because he's so independent, and that's the goal. Like, he's never been a person who could really have a boss well, or like he just needed to do his own thing. And so when I heard that and I was like taking that spin on and explaining it in that way, I knew he would be like, oh my, I cannot believe I've never thought about it this way. I can't work for insurance companies. And that's when, for me, that's when I saw the light bulb come on for him. But maybe you have a different moment. I don't know, but that's what I remember.
No, I remember that. I can see us in the kitchen right now talking about it.
Yeah.
And when you told me about, after I listened to him, then her and I had another conversation, and when I heard it and when I heard him explaining things, I was like, shit, now I have to, because I'll never stop thinking about that. And I'll always feel like I'm under someone else or working for the man, I guess.
I feel like that's a very Andy thing that I've noticed. That it's like when you realize something, and I've seen it in the mastermind group. I saw it at Slow Down School. It's like when you see a new way of seeing, you really are that. Like, once you see, you can't unsee, and you go for it, and you run towards it, and you put in the work. And so, what were some things that once you were like, wait, there's a new way of doing this. I could do a group practice. I could leave those cruddy insurances.
Yeah.
What were your first steps that you took?
So I said, now that you have this, you've come to this same realization that I have, Joe can help us. I know we can, but we have to reach out, apply, see if he has room to take us on as consulting clients. And at the time I was just for Andy to do it. I wanted Andy to be all in. I was still working all day. We have 2 young kids, and I said, this would be the next step if you're all in, if you want to do it.
I would have wanted to try to do it by myself. Basically, I would have said, okay, that's cool. There's the Joe guy. That means it's possible. So I'll just go do it. But for some reason, I was okay with not trying to do it on my own. I think part of it was being 40 and something changed. And I hit a milestone in my solo practice income wise that I never thought I would ever hit, which was six digits. And I thought I felt accomplished as far as in a solo practice. And I used to tell Carrie, I don't feel like I've got to find my way through the forest here. I mean, Joe's already been through the forest. He's standing on the other side. He can come through and just show me the path to take, and bring me over to his side. So then that's what we went for.
Now, maybe what were some of the big things that you worked on maybe in those 6 months of consulting? Because I think that there are still those people that say, you know what, I'm going to just do it on my own. And I want them to get value out of this podcast, whether or not they work with us. So what are some of the big mindset shifts or things that either you did or Carrie that you saw that really sped things up for you?
I mean, I think the fact that he was doing it and he was the one working with you, but at the same time, I was still on the side doing my other research. So not that it can't be done with one person, for sure it can, but I think us as a team, I began reading everything I could get my hands on about SEO because I knew that we live in a suburb of Columbus, which is a big city. And I knew that in order for us to really make a go at this, where there are a lot of other counseling practices, we had to differentiate ourselves. And I saw that wearing my marketing hat, that was going to be with a website that blew other websites around here away.
I just want your website template and to be able to just like resell it. It is so beautiful. I mean, when you guys pulled it up at Slowdown School, everyone like gasped. Like they had such website envy. It was amazing. Like those of you that are listening, you have to go to blueboatcounseling.com to check it out. When you guys, because I know that Blue Boat, we had a decision point where you had to decide, am I going to do like columbuscounseling.com or am I going to do something unique? Andy, share a little bit on that decision of, do you go the unique route and not care as much about the SEO for the actual URL, or you go the kind of traditional like columbuscounseling.com?
Yeah, so we're in our suburb or little city here within Columbus is Worthington. So everything around us was Worthington wellness, Worthington counseling, or it was like horizons, reflections, directions, connections, all the shuns.
Bunch of funeral home names.
Right. Yeah.
Or things that are I thought that you could forget those easily because they blend together. Like I don't remember which one is which, so what would be different and not get blended into that mix?
Yeah. So, and then you and I had a conversation, Joe, in one of our sessions, and you said, well, it's a bold move, but I've had people go pick like an object or something abstract or a color or both. And we had talked about that and somehow tying in some meaning to it. That also tied into counseling somehow. So then Carrie and I had a conversation about it, and which is usually me pacing back and forth in a room, free associating into the air, and her writing things down and translating it. Yeah.
So Blue Boat, I know the story, but maybe tell us the story of how you landed on that.
So we thought, okay, let's go with like an object and a color. We knew for sure the color would be blue because of my affinity for the color blue. Ever since I was a little kid, just everything had to be blue, or if it was any kind of color choice, I wanted blue. And then we picked boat because we would take trips every summer with cousins to an amusement park here in Ohio. And when I was little, waiting in line for these rides, and it was, well, I'm the next one to get on the ride, the boat or the plane or whatever would come around, or the car. If it wasn't blue, then I didn't want to get in it. So I would usually just step out of the way and let the next kid get in it, and then would just count until the blue one came up. Then I would jump in that one. So then, okay, now we've got that. Well, how do we tie that into counseling? Because I'm already thinking of these cool logos and stuff, with this boat. And so we kind of tied it into, a feeling, I guess, like you want, striving to be happy, and it's okay to have to take steps in your life to make yourself happy. So for me, in a small version of that was, 5-year-old me waiting on a blue boat. If I was in a different color, then I wasn't mad, but I just wasn't as happy. So.
And you weren't being yourself. And that's what this was all about, was like, he was always himself. He didn't get in the yellow boat because he was like supposed to, because it was the next one. He waited for the blue because he was being his true self. And so that's also what Andy has talked about for years, is that's what he gets the most out of counseling, when he can help somebody like realize who they're really supposed to be on this planet and be that person. And so that's why our tagline is "Be You," because it's really just about being who you are. And that's
Absolutely.
what he was doing in the Blue Boat, was being himself.
I love that story. I feel like it's so, like, we all have those things as kids that we were super into for whatever reason we were into it. And the idea of naming your practice after some of those things, it's like, yeah, it just feels so much more authentic, and it's not going to blend in. And people are like, Blue Boat, what's the story there? I mean, it's a great way, you know, at a networking meeting or something else, to just be able to kind of share a story that ties into counseling.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then, Carrie, you joined the practice. Andy, you both get this group practice going. Take us through some of the adding clinicians to your practice, adding Carrie, that story of how and why she joined the practice.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So I think that's a big piece of our story. So, you know, we left off the story saying that Andy started to work with you in one-on-one consulting, and we knew we wanted to grow it. We made that decision. He was working with you, and then probably 2 months later, I was in a meeting and looked up in an org chart, and my position was gone. So I met this giant corporate giant of a food company. And you feel like you're on this safe barge. We always thought Andy's out doing his own thing, being his own boss. His piece is the risk, right? Mine's the safe one. And then one day you realize that doesn't really mean that. You're never really, it's never really as safe as you think it is. You know, you're always having to, prepare. I guess you don't know that it's going to happen to you, and then it does. And so I think a takeaway for me was just like, don't wait on these things, because, the timing actually worked for us. And I have said multiple times to my colleagues I used to work with, I was so angry in the beginning because nobody had a conversation with me before I saw that org chart. I just saw it and it was gone. And I was so mad. But then I was there for months after that because I stayed on for a while. And when I left, I actually left in this huge place of gratitude, because it opened a door for us that I think it would have taken us a long time to open on our own, for me to actually step off of that corporate barge without actually kind of being pushed off. So that was basically when that happened, and we knew that I was had less than a year until I was out of a corporate job. Can we do this? Can we make this work, grow it enough to sustain our family so I don't need another corporate job? Because I can tell you, after seeing that org chart, I was ready to be done with corporate for a while.
I remember Andy kind of saying, Carrie's, losing her job. She had severance for this period of time. I want to have the practice at this point so that she can join. And what a great motivator. I want to go back to that point of Andy's job feeling like the risky one, but actually the corporate job being the risky one, because I feel like that's such an important insight. And I've never heard it framed that way. But I remember when I was leaving the community college, and every Monday, my friend Taylor and I walk, and we still walk every Monday, and talk through all sorts of things. And, the year or so that I was hashing through, should I leave? Should I stay? This podcast thing's taking off. But I have, great pension benefits and all these things through the college. And when I looked at it every year, with inflation being 2 to 3%, depending on the year, we never got a 2 to 3% raise. And so every year I was making less, unless I moved into a management position where I then worked 50 hours a week. And, to think that every year I'm making less, and that, my future is totally based on someone else's decisions.
Yeah.
My friend Taylor said to me, he said, well, do you trust your ability to make money more than, the community college's ability to give you a raise? And it was just like, yeah. Like, if I want to make an extra $1,000 next month, I could just see more counseling clients at the time, or, I could, get a couple more consulting clients, or, now it's like, I see these visions of what I want to do, and I get our team to do it. And so it's crazy to think about the risky thing being the typical corporate 40-hour-a-week job. But I love that point. So then,
Yeah.
Andy, what did you do during that kind of interim phase? So Carrie's losing her job. She's still working there. There's a little severance that's going to give you a buffer. But I mean, for most families, that would be like a holy hell kind of moment. Like, what are we going to do? How did you put the pedal to the metal and get things going in the practice?
I mean, I remember a lot of conversations of you and I on the phone, and me pacing around my office, stricken with anxiety, but vowing that I'm going to do what I'm going to do the next step, even if you pushed a little bit or we pushed together to make it a bigger step than maybe I had forecasted. So it was about, I guess it was when I think of it in a feeling sense, I guess it was about pushing through the fear. When I look back on it, I was fearful. So it was just about, well, what do you either like get scared and stop, or you get scared and just keep going. And in the whole scheme of things, what I kept telling myself was, well, if it doesn't work out, then Carrie is very intelligent and has multiple college degrees and could go get on another big ship. So I don't know what the answer there is. I guess it's about pushing through.
A lot of times people feel like, oh, if this fails, like we're going to be homeless. It's like, really? Mm-hmm. If you saw this ship going down, you're saying you wouldn't go get a job at Starbucks to at least have some like health insurance, like worst case scenario, like really. And so I think people think that they're always like on this brink of disaster, when the reality is, if things start getting really rough, there's probably someone that will hire you out there.
Yeah.
It may not be your ideal job, but it's like, so take those risks, and like, what's the reward versus the risk? Usually the reward or the potential reward is way bigger than what the actual real life risk is.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's funny you say that, because I'd go on these rants sometimes in the midst of this whole thing, and I'd tell Carrie, like, I don't want to move. I just kept saying, like, I don't want to move. Like, we'd have to move out of our house. We don't live in like this giant house that's super expensive or anything. I don't want to move, to like an apartment, and, because this thing didn't happen. Well, the other thing I want to mention about that, after what you just said, Joe, is time, and how big of a factor time is in this whole thing. The rug doesn't get pulled out from under you in a split second. I mean, if you see the thing starting to go down, which we didn't, and we're very thankful for. And I think that's a testament to our relationship and the caliber of our teamwork together. But if you see the thing to start to go down, then you put the parachute on and jump out. You know what I mean? And then you're fine. So it's not like, I remember having to put that through my head, like, it's not all going to happen in a day. So like you said, you start seeing it. Okay, well then you go work at Starbucks, or you do whatever you have to do, right? Like,
right.
Yeah.
So you start to add clinicians to the practice. You start kind of onboarding Carrie. Take us through that period of going beyond Andy, because that's a big jump for most people to go from a solopreneur to now a group practice in mindset and taking off hats and kind of setting culture when you've just been able to show up. What were some helpful kind of steps during that phase of bringing people on to the practice?
Well, again, I think it was just it was so different because I was so used to doing everything on my own. But I just went through the steps, I interviewed people, and it was at the same time I was transitioning off of insurance to private pay myself. So it was like, everyone I bring on is going to be private pay. And, the thought is like, well, who's going to want to work for me, or who's going to want to work with me? Like, I don't know. I think we kind of tend to have these negative thought processes sometimes with this stuff, and it's usually the opposite of what we're thinking. But yeah, so it was nice to have other people. It started to feel nice to have someone else on board, no pun intended. And then when I saw that work, and I saw that, our first person we hired was Julia, I saw that she was happy and she liked coming in. She liked seeing her clients. She liked that she was private pay. She liked that she made her own hours. She liked me. Then I thought, okay, well, if one did it, then that means probably a whole bunch would do it, and how big can we make this,
Yeah. Well, I want to spend kind of the rest of the interview talking about your relationship inside of the practice and things that have gone well, things that have totally blown up. Because when we were at Killing It Camp, there were 3 couples, so 6 people that had come to Killing It Camp as couples. And they were like carbon copies of you two, where one's a therapist and one was like a support, but they were working in the practice. And we started a text string with your permission to connect with those people, because I feel like there are unique needs in regards to partners that are partners outside of the practice but also partners within the practice. Maybe take us through some disasters. Like what were times that you guys fought or got in each other's way or just didn't recognize each other's skills, that you're like, I think couples should probably think about this before they jump into this sort of kind of relationship, this professional relationship?
I can start if you want.
Go ahead.
I wouldn't, to be totally honest, I would not say we've had huge disasters, and I'm not just sugarcoating it. Like we've also been like head down, like Andy said, we were on a time crunch that a lot of people aren't forced to be on. Like if we were going to make this work and I was not going to go back into the corporate world, we were on a time frame. So it was kind of like, put your head down and do it. But, we wear very different hats. I do not have a clue what it's like to be a counselor other than being married to one. So, that's never a territory I step in or step over. And I do, I have marketing background, marketing history, plus I've read a ton of books and done a lot of research. We worked with Jessica Tapana on our SEO from Simplified SEO Consulting. She's amazing. So even though I'd read all these books and I have a marketing degree, I still needed somebody to like kind of hold my hand over the edge to really make it happen. And she was awesome for that. So it was like I was living in this digital marketing world and Andy's living in this counseling world, but I also do all these other little hats, right? So I'm the bookkeeper and I'm, the stock person. These are all things that as we expand and grow are going to go away and we'll outsource. But I think probably where we've fallen short, which is ironic because we are like great communicators in our marriage, but for some reason in this business, wearing these separate hats and being so busy with it, we're not always the best at communicating about what the other one is doing. So in terms of like Andy, helping with like managing, we have contractors, so that's a loose area, but like, working with clinicians on their schedule and doing the admin part of that and me doing the marketing, actually communicating about what each other's doing, it's probably where we've fallen short the most. But like I said, it's heads down, do it. And then we're like, we realize this. And as we start to outsource more and gain more time is where we're going to get better at those things, I think.
So like you guys did a big sponsorship at kind of football games, which is kind of marketing, but then Andy and the mastermind group was like, how should I do this? So how did you guys navigate something that's marketing, which is more Carrie's domain, and Andy having kind of this idea of like, let's sponsor sports, like something like that. It's very practical. Like, yeah. Were you guys on the same page with that? Or was that kind of, you had to figure out who's kind of in charge of what? Like, how do you negotiate that?
Gosh, I don't know. How did we negotiate that?
Andy's the social one of the two of us, right? Which I think puts him in a position.
I would not guess based on Slow Down School and hanging out at the campfire. Really? Okay. And like, I think you guys are, at least from my perspective, it seems like you're pretty equal, but.
Well, thank you.
I would agree with that actually.
It takes work for me, and not work like in a bad way, just after I've had like a lot of social things, especially with new people, I feel very drained by it, whereas Andy feels pretty energized by it. So
that's like me and Christina too. Like everyone is like, she must be an extrovert, but she's so like drained by it. But you would never guess it. Like at Slow Down School, people would be like, what are you talking about? Like you'd never know. She just like jumps right in, but same thing. Yeah.
So I think I love being in my marketing cave with my screens and like doing my digital marketing.
Did you say screens? How many screens do you have?
Well, just 2, but like one.
The way you did your hands, I just pictured like a wraparound screen.
Okay, well, not that, but a small one and a big one that always has
a PowerPoint projector
windows open.
And a hologram.
So I love being in here and So the community stuff is actually where I am not so good. Like Andy's the one who goes out and, if he's going to go to a doctor's office or whatever, or a school, he's the one who does those things. As far as community marketing, I would actually say it's more Andy than me. But with that, it was always, we live in our hometown. And so the high school that we sponsored the game for recently is actually our high school that we went to. And it was like really one of his things that he was really wanted to have our logo on the scoreboard, and just thought that would really feel like you've come full circle if you now have your company sponsoring our high school where we are helping those students. And so that was actually just a really big goal that he had. And then I kind of stepped in to help make it happen. But it was definitely a goal of his from that standpoint. But he's more of the community leader, whereas I'm more of a digital cave girl.
It sounds like you kind of have an idea of who's going to do what, and like almost who's the lead on a project. Is that accurate, or is it more fluid than that?
No, I think you're right. I think if you could present a random, project and without even us, I think we'd both be thinking the same thing. Oh, that's a you thing, or that's definitely a her thing.
Yeah.
I know that me and Christina work better when we kind of know who the lead is on something. So for example, a year or two ago, she wanted to have, I just wanted this fire pit that was just like one of those metal rings, like not a big deal, and just put it out there. We got a campfire. Whereas she wanted this whole like brick built in kind of thing. And I just said to her, if you want to pick it out, I'll help you move the stones. I'll be your general contractor. You just tell me what to do. So she's like, I need you to dig down 6 inches here. And then she figured out the pea gravel and got it all kind of situated and caulked and everything. But it's like, we know who's in charge. Like, she is in charge. I can keep my mouth shut and just say, you tell me what to do. For us, that works way better for kind of bigger projects than, us both trying to be in charge.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are a couple other quick kind of tips for people that are working with a partner in this type of arrangement?
Communication, I guess. Yeah. I mean, obviously, do
you have regular sit downs that are scheduled, or is it just kind of as needed?
So this is where we fell short. We started doing that, and then we got crazy busy, and then we stopped. And we're starting again. And
you're announcing it publicly on a podcast that 100,000 people listen to. So
we are,
accountability right there.
Accountability, yeah. But I do think I think that is huge to really. I don't think you can be partners and business owners without talking about not only what you're doing today, but where you're going and where you want it to go. I am a big Mike Michalowicz fan, so we implement Profit First. But I wasn't sure if we were there yet, but I recently started reading Clockwork, and I think in order to be in that designing phase of your business and really plan the visions you have and where you want it to go. If you're doing it together, you have to talk about it and figure all that out together and what it looks like and plan it. And so,
and if you guys aren't familiar with Clockwork, I had an interview with Mike Michalowicz earlier this year. We'll put that in the show notes. And then also I talk about private practice on Mike Michalowicz's podcast as well. So we'll put both those things in the show notes. Well, I want to hear a little bit about Slowdown School, because we've had a few couples come to Slowdown School. The tickets open for that in mid-January, which is about when this podcast will go live. But maybe walk people through the experience of Slowdown School for you, because I think it's hard to really understand what Slowdown School is, how it works. I can talk about it all day long on the podcast, but I think until you fully experience it, it's hard to know. But maybe walk us through, what was your experience at Slowdown School, and we can talk a little bit about what that experience was like and what the impact was for you.
So the idea, I feel like the idea is just what you say. You slow down for a couple days, and then it kind of opens your mind and lets all these ideas come in, to get away from the hustle and bustle, not think about work for a couple days, and then the ideas come in for what you want to do, and you have time to think about it, write it down, create plans. was awesome. I mean, it was great for us. We had a little different setup. We didn't stay on site, but just being around, I think that formula, and then also being around other people in the same place in their career or practices is always just so valuable, because the idea is you can bounce off each other, and, oh, I remember when I was there and this is what I did, or, oh, someone else saying that to you, like, oh, I was where you are a year ago and this is what I did. Maybe that'll work for you, type thing.
And I think for me, if I can like add in a piece of advice here for like those couples, for the spouse who's not the therapist, I was super excited to go, but honestly, I was a little hesitant, knowing that in this case, I would be the only one who wasn't a therapist and wasn't sure what that would feel like. And I guess when you step back and think about it, it is a group of therapists. Like, everybody's so like kind and welcoming. And, I never felt like an outsider. I thought I might, that I might feel different because my background is so different and I'm not a therapist, so I can't really have those conversations. But because, this slowdown school is really about, the slowing down to have ideas for, about your business, right? So it's not like it's focused on being a therapist. I was intimidated by that going in. I'm being transparent, but it was such a non-factor. So I would say, like, if you are a couple and you have a spouse who's not a therapist, but is working in the business, it was so valuable for me to be there, even as someone who wasn't a therapist, but who's working on this business, because the learning from each other, obviously from Joe and from, the other consultants there, but just from each other group practice owners, and feeling like I had things to give. Like, there were, people picking my brain while we were there, and just having people in your world doing what you're doing was amazing.
Yeah. Now, for the slowdown days, so Sunday, we kind of set the vision, it's slowing down, kind of focusing on kind of retreat for a couple days. For that Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, what were things that stood out to you that felt really helpful in helping you slow down?
The hike. The hikes we took. The hikes. When I think about slowdown school, that's the first place my brain goes. Is hiking through the dunes, and really the ones where we would hike up through the woods, and then you'd come to the clearing through the trees, and you could see the water, and that you're on this, you're 1,000 feet up in the air on this sand dune. And when you and I, Joe, kind of went off to, we'd jump ahead a couple 100 yards to kind of scout something out, then go back and tell the rest of the group. That was really neat, because I was kind of behind you. I mean, I'm a lot taller than you, but I was behind you, and you were like showing me, I'm following you through these narrow passages through the woods, and we're checking out where they lead, and then going back and showing them. In my head, I'm like, well, damn, he is doing it. He's showing me through the woods, just like I thought he was going to do in the first place.
Well, I think there is something just fun about being an adult that's just exploring. When you're kids, you go do that. You make forts. At least our kids still do. I don't know how common that is these days, but to find new things and find new trails, and where does this go, and to just not think about business or your family or all that life stuff, and just say, okay, I'm gonna have an adventure right now. Is so fun, to do with people. And especially when people aren't from Michigan, which most of the slowdown schoolers aren't, and they see Lake Michigan for the first time, and they're like, this is like an ocean. It's like, yeah, you can't see Wisconsin across.
Totally.
Like,
yeah.
Yeah, the California people were my favorite in regards to like their reaction. Like, what? We didn't know that there was water this big. And we're like, yeah, welcome to Lake Michigan.
Right.
So what about the work days? So Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday morning. So we do some sprints, and we did some kind of individual exercises, group exercises. What stood out to the two of you? And Carrie, why don't you kick this one off for us? What was helpful for you during those days?
I loved the sprints. I think from a couple standpoint, it was, okay, let's go off and do a couple of individual sprints. And then as we get more into it, we actually started doing ours together, because it was we almost found it easier to bounce it off of each other because we're both in it, so that's what works the best for us from a couple standpoint. But it's amazing what your brain does when it's pushed to have 20 minutes to accomplish a, free thinking, where's this going to go? So yeah. And plus, being for us together, it was we walk out of it wow, that's, now let's go do that,
Yeah. Yeah. So yep. Friday afternoon, we kind of land the plane for the week. And I want to ask your advice if we should do the same thing we did last year. So last year we did a chocolate tasting over at Grocer's Daughter. Then we went to Cherry Republic and tasted all these different cherry products and cherry wines and things like that. And then we went down to Fish Town to see this crazy fishing town. Would you say that would be a good thing to do each year, or should we change it up every year?
I mean,
I thought it was awesome.
Yeah, it's hard to top. I think it was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even just tasting, was it cacao juice? The juice of the plant that makes chocolate. It was this weird sour juice that was so interesting. So yeah, I had never had that before either. So
yeah, it was awesome.
Cool. Well, for people that are considering Slow Down School, mastermind groups, one-on-one consulting, what would you say that they should consider before they apply for it?
That's a good question.
I think, really do your own soul searching to know that you're ready to do the work. Because when you go into this, I think that's what I love about seeking out consultants and the help we've gotten from Joe, and is that if you're ready and prepared to go in and do the work, you can fast forward this thing. You really can, because like Andy said, you've been through the woods, you've taken the path, you can advise on the way to go. And so you can really put this thing into high gear, but you've got to be ready to do the work when you go in. So really make sure that's where you are in your life and your family and everything, that you're ready to do it, and then just jump all in.
Andy, what about you? What do you think?
I would agree with that. I mean, I feel like if you're hungry and there's a little bit of not a code red or a crisis, but if there's some sense of urgency there and you want it bad enough and you can envision what you want your life to look like, that also energizes your teacher. That I feel like that energized you, Joe, when I worked with you individually, and since we've worked with you in Mastermind, our story probably helped that a little bit. Oh, there's the clock's ticking, with this severance. And it was the clock ticking down in the game, Yeah, I mean, if I think what Carrie said rings true, to be all in and ready to do the work and want to do the work because you want to change your life.
Yeah, and it has changed ours.
Oh, I love hearing that. That never gets old for me. Oh my gosh. Well, Carrie, if every private practice owner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
Well, I think it's probably kind of cliche, and I've already been saying it, but don't wait. Like we just said, be ready to do the work. But if you are ready to do the work, don't sit around thinking that the right time will come, because there's never necessarily a right time. So just if it's on your mind and it excites you, and just go for it.
Awesome. And Andy, what about you? If every practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
I guess that it can be done. If you're doubting that it can happen, or that it can, we're evidence of it. And I'm evidence of it, specifically because I'm resistant. I'm resistant to doing things. I want to do things all by myself, but I had a vision. We had this vision, and be open to it, and it can happen. Your vision can become a reality, and really it can get better than what you even envisioned, which is kind of, I think we're starting to knock on that door a little bit where we're at.
Yeah. One thing I was going to ask you that would kind of go along with that, are there any numbers that you feel comfortable sharing? So it could be, I used to see this many people and now our practice sees this many, if there's any financials or things like that, that for you, you feel comfortable sharing, I went from here to here over this period of time.
I mean, I think a huge one is client numbers. I mean, we're still growing. We're still doing this thing. I mean, we have 4 other clinicians other than Andy. 2 are part-time, and one we just hired. She's going to be full-time. But just some of those numbers are, Andy used to see, I don't know, there were weeks where you were pushing 30 clients, high 20s for sure. Now our practice just a few weeks ago broke 50 clients in a week, and Andy saw like 15 of those maybe. So that was a huge, being able to, scale him back to be able to work on the business more and have these other clinicians doing their thing in our practice. So, and financially we've had, way bigger numbers. We have probably $25,000 a month we've hit, I think.
October was our highest.
Yeah, that was almost 30, I think.
It was 32, I think.
Yeah. So
yeah, I always like getting your texts, Andy, like, and you're like, we just broke this. It's
I did. That's right. I did shoot you that text. Yeah.
Yeah. And we probably get with our, we probably get at least about 10 to 12 new client calls a week. We don't convert all those since we're private pay, but I mean, that's pretty huge. It goes a testament to our website. Once we get people there, our website does convert people pretty well.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an amazing ride, and we're on the upswing still.
That's so awesome. Well, if people want to connect with you, if they want to look at your awesome, beautiful website that they will feel terrible about their own, no. What's the best way for them to connect with you?
Just go to blueboatcounseling.com. I mean, that's our our heart and soul is in that website. My blood, sweat, and tears is in all the words. Like we worked really hard on that website, and I continue to tweak it and work on it every week, I think. So, but yeah, that's probably the best place. You can find any way to contact us or most of the things about our practice and everything on that site.
Awesome. Well, I'm so proud of all the work that you two have put into the practice and all that you're doing for people in the Columbus area. Those of you that are listening, if you're considering doing one-on-one consulting, mastermind group, or slowdown school, you can head on over to practiceofthepractice.com/apply or slowdownschool.com. And then I will personally interview you before you come to slowdown school, because we want everyone to be a really good fit and to get a great return on investment for that time and money. Carrie and Andy, thanks so much for being on the Practice of the Practice podcast.
Thanks for having us, Joe.
And one last thank you to you, Joe, because I really believe that we wouldn't be where we are at this time without your help. So thank you for everything.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you, buddy.